Film today's event at this year's Swindon Festival of Literature, a little bit coronavirus affected and therefore online. Thank you for joining us. We do hope that everything is well where you are. We're both pleased and grateful that human ingenuity, cutting-edge science and digital technology make it possible for this show to go on, at least to go on online. And this event is presented in association with Swindon's Lydiard Parkrun and Seven Fields Parkrun, two great parkruns in our town. Today's guest author has written a book titled How Parkrun Changed Our Lives. This is it. And note, it's parkrun with a small p. She has dedicated the book to the memory of one John Nettleton, a runner and volunteer at her own Fellfoot Parkrun. John started park running at the age of 86 and died as this book was being finished at the age of 92. This event today at the Swindon Festival of Literature is also dedicated to the memory of a local runner, a Swindon-based runner. In late March, while out running in town, local man Tariq Hussain lost his life in an accident with a motor vehicle. He would have been 60 yesterday. So this weekend, Swindon runners and walkers have been wearing yellow and blue, Tariq's favourite running colours, and dedicating their runs and their walks to him. One Swindon runner, Tracy, wrote, "We didn't know him, but we know. We know what it was for him to look out of the window and whatever the weather, to decide to run anyway, to lace up his shoes, to smile for a thumbs up to other passing runners, to feel out of breath but still get up the hill, to press stop on his watch when he reached home, but not this last time. So this run is for Tariq." Therefore now, we here will pause for a moment and think of John, Tariq and their families. Thank you. Now, in true parkrun spirit of supporting one another and of doing things together and in numbers, today's author is joined by two guest interviewers, both runners, readers, and parkrunners. Please join me in giving them a Swindon Festival of Literature welcome to the guest interviewers, Ruth Holland and Emma Sperring, and today's guest author, former fell runner, who actually once won a teapot in a fell race, and now runs and volunteers at her local parkrun in Windermere. Eileen Jones, welcome.
Nice to see you.
And who are those other two people that we've got there?
Hello, it's lovely. I feel very honoured to be here, to be part of this discussion. And I'm based in Bristol, but I feel Swindon is my second home. It's where I spent my teenage years. But the welcome at the Swindon Parkrun is heartwarming, and it's always a pleasure to be there. So thank you for letting me be a part of this.
And who else have we got?
Hi everyone. So my name's Emma Sperring, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here and meet with you all today. And I'm looking forward to hearing all about your book, Eileen. So really exciting, and looking forward to talking about parkrun, of course, something I've been involved with for quite a long time now.
Thanks very much, Emma. Just before we get to the book, actually, that Emma has just mentioned, I'll ask two of you, because one of you has already said she's been to Swindon. That's rather nice. So Eileen and Emma, Swindon in the spring is really lovely, as most runners know here. Have you been to Swindon before?
I've never been at all at any time of the year, but I promise you, Matt, after this, I'm coming. And I sincerely hope that we can do a festival in real life next year, and I shall come along and be in your audience next time for certain.
Fantastic. We start the festival with a Freedom Park run every year, so you'd have to join us in. And Emma, have you ever been to Swindon?
I certainly have. I've been here for 18 years now, and And I absolutely love living here. I know it's criticised. Our town's criticised sometimes, but I think it's a great place to live. And of course, you've got one of the best park runs here. So yeah, I really do. I love Swindon, and I hope you can come next year, Eileen, and see what it's all about here.
Love to.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Emma. Okay, we better get to the topic in hand. This very clearly titled book, if ever a title was clear, this one is How Parkrun Changed Our Lives. Now, one of today's guest interviewers described the book as unputdownable. So, Eileen, how did both doing parkrun and writing a book about it change your life?
Well, how parkrun changed my life started back in the mid-2000s. I had been a fell runner, running up and down the hills, particularly in the Lake District where I now live, for quite a number of years. And they are quite challenging races, and they attract a lot of the really top people who know where they're going and can move across rough ground very quickly. And as time went by, I was further and further at the back of the field, so far off the back of the pack that I felt I wasn't taking part in it anymore, and becoming a little bit embarrassed for the poor marshals who were standing on the summits waiting for me to turn up so that they could tick me off the safety list. And so I stopped racing. I still train on the fells, but I just felt lost a little bit, that I wasn't part of a community anymore. My sister introduced me to Heaton Parkrun in Manchester, which is where we both grew up. And the first time I did it, I was just smitten. Suddenly I wasn't at the back, nobody's ever last. There were people around me that I could have a bit of a tussle with. It was a manageable distance, even if you'd been injured. And the community spirit, the welcome I got was fantastic. So I started to look for other parkruns to do. There was one north of here, near where I live, in Keswick in the Lakes. I did that a few times. And both my sons were living in London. So when I went to see them, I would do Gunnersbury Park, Brockwell. I went to the inaugural Tooting Common Parkrun, discovered that parkrun tourism was a thing. And at the same time, met some people locally who were talking about getting a parkrun in the South Lakes area. And we worked together with the National Trust and set up Fellfoot in 2014. And since then, I've been combining running and volunteering at Fellfoot with tourism. So I've been to 104 different events, and I've met some wonderful people at every single one of them. And I often go on my own, I travel on my own, and I've never ever turned up feeling anxious or nervous, wondering if anybody will speak to me, because parkrun is just so welcoming wherever you go. So that's how parkrun really changed my running life. I've been a writer all my life, but a jobbing writer mostly, a journalist. I'm a publicist. I write material for my clients' websites and blogs. And I also have a sideline, or had, in theatre reviewing, which of course has been completely dormant for the past year. So I was very busy with my writing. I had written one book which was published many years ago, a biography of Neil Kinnock, which I did in another fallow period intellectually when my children were very tiny. So I wasn't actually working writing, and I needed to fill that gap. Since then, I've been working writing, and the gap hasn't needed to be filled until a year ago. And everything stopped very abruptly at the first lockdown. My clients are all in tourism and hospitality and heritage here in the Lake District. And many of them are still not even open yet. So my working life came to a very, very abrupt halt. And after 2 or 3 months of whinging and moaning about it, my younger son suggested it was maybe time to write another book. And I'm a natural storyteller. And when I've been doing my parkrun tourism, I would come back to Fellfoot and tell stories from other places, tell my friends about my travels, about the runs I'd done, the different courses. And they would say, you ought to write a book about it. And I'd say, oh, I'm far too busy. I haven't got time to do that. And then one morning last summer, I woke up. I don't know what other people's literary inspirations are. I woke up with an opening sentence in my head, which became the first sentence of chapter 1. This notion that perhaps parkrun was a new religion. And as soon as I got that first sentence in my mind, I had to do it. I got up really early. I came down to the keyboard. Within an hour, I got 2,000 words written, and it just wrote itself from there. It was absolutely wonderful experience to write it, because everybody I approached for help, from Paul Sinton Hewitt down to all the tourists I've met along the way, everyone was so enthusiastic and so keen to be part of something again. And it was an absolute joy to write. And I'm so thrilled that people seem to be loving it as well.
Eileen, thank you very much. There are a couple of parkrun definitions. The definition of a lie-in, something that existed before parkrun, and the definition of a volunteer, the light at the end of the funnel. That's a Swindon original, that second one. The other one has been around a while.
Yeah.
Eileen, thanks very much. Ruth, why did you find this book unputdownable? Because I did too, and I'm quite a serious reader. Why did you find it unputdownable?
Well, thank you, Eileen, for writing it. Something about also what you said, that the time that we've been going through, when my husband found the review in The Guardian and ordered it, unbeknownst to me, and it arrived pretty quickly, and that was it. I just sat down and read it within 48 hours, and I'm not usually a quick reader. But what it did for me, I felt, was to do with the times we're living in, these challenging times, that it just re-inspired me. It just stirred me. It reminded me, in many ways, you said the many things that, you know, I've discussed with fellow writers and runners, should I say. And it just brought it all alive to me again. And I think I've been running more since reading it than I have in the year, partly due to injury. So that's what it's done for me. And I just want to spread the word. Well, I have already. I'll say that.
Thank you.
Genuinely, Eileen, it really did. And it had all the quality, you know, it spoke of the qualities that are parkrun. And I thank you again.
Thank you. That's lovely to hear.
And you start. It's interesting that the hook for the reader and the hook for you as a writer was this idea that parkrun is like a religion. And to me, as a serious book reviewer, it's a dodgy metaphor that works one way and is slightly dangerous another way.
Yeah.
Because one can become fanatical in religious matters.
Absolutely.
And needs to beware of that, it strikes me, in parkrun matters. And yet the word communion, which applies to church going, also applies to parkrun. In other words, it's a communion of runners. They meet at a regular time and they develop a particular feeling that they know they can call on in times of need.
Absolutely. As
we've seen with John Nettleton and Tariq Hussein and many others since, and many others doubtless in the future. It's a remarkable spirit, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I think it's very difficult to say what parkrun actually is, because it's obviously much more than about running, and it's more than about community. Spirit is a very good word for it. It has to be something all-encompassing, because it does take over our lives, but it takes over our lives in only positive ways. I can't find anything that's negative about parkrun. I'm lucky because I don't have a problem getting up early in the mornings. There are people who say, why does it have to start at 9 o'clock on a Saturday? But apart from that, it just brings joy to people's lives.
Isn't it strange that, because we must beware, just singing the praises of something, it cannot be perfect, and we will look at some of its fault lines if there are any. But Emma, what do you think of parkrun?
What do I think of parkrun? I think it's amazing. when we first launched Parkrun in 2010, I really thought it was just going to be for a few weeks. You know, I said, you know, that I would volunteer for the first couple of weeks and, you know, and see how it went. I had no idea at the time what an impact it would have, not only on myself and my lifestyle, but also the Swindon community, because ever since the launch day, you know, the numbers just kept increasing. And therefore, isn't it a good thing that, you know, all these wonderful people, all different types of people are coming together every single Saturday and having a great time. And it's not just about running, as you say, it's the volunteering, it's the chatting, it's, you know, it's even being silent as well. Some people just come along on their own and they just want to mill about and they're quite happy walking around the course or jogging around the course on their own, and it just gives people that time in our wonderful country park that we have, that is Lydiard, and also Sevenfields, of course, in that green space. And and on a Saturday morning, I think 9 o'clock's perfect because, of course, it's not too early. Well, I don't think so. I'm a bit of a morning bird, but it's also not too late, so people can get on with their days. So, yeah, I can only say positive, wonderful things about parkrun myself. And of course, there are some negativities, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but very few.
And even when one mentions those, they're immediately outweighed by something else. You know, I was thinking, for example, Eileen splits this book up into fascinating chapters where she deals with partly with anecdotes, partly with research, partly with statistics, partly with the sense that could Big Brother be watching us by having all this information about us? You know, people can go online and see what age I am, and I'm not sure we want that. On the other hand, when they look at my age grading and then look at my age, I think, yeah, why not? So there's always something, there's always some compensating factor. Did you unearth any shortcomings in parkrun as you were working on the book, Eileen?
I wouldn't call them shortcomings. I think that's an interesting point that you raise about the statistical information that's there about runners. But I think PSH has said from the outset that he wanted openness and transparency. And I think that most people are happy with that. What I always say is this is a voluntary activity. If you don't want to sign up for it, you don't need to do it. There are plenty of ways to go for a run or join in a race if you don't want to provide all your details. But I think part of knowing about each other is what makes us a community. It's what makes us able to understand one another. And I think it's a rather wonderful thing, to be honest. Funnily enough, I was interviewed last week on a podcast by Ed Miliband, and I'd only just realised that he was a parkrunner. There are no closet parkrunners because you can look up their details. But what he didn't realise was about the Chrome extension, which gives you access to all the extra data. So as the interview began, I was able to read to him his extra statistics that he had been parkrunning in 4 different countries, 37,640 kilometers to do parkruns. And his face was such a picture. And he kept saying, how do I find this out? Tell me how I get all of this. But I think going back to the original point, that knowing about people, having knowledge of people is what brings us together, and it's how we can support one another and how we can connect, because it's all about connections. It's all about recognizing people and being together with that knowledge about who they are.
And you have a brilliant passage in the book, in your chapter on numbers, where you address the question that many people have raised in this digital 21st century that we live in. Can't more and more parkrun things be made more digitalized and smoother? And one of them was that we are scanned as we go through the finishing line, so there's no need to bloody well queue and all that stuff. And you make a point brilliantly. I mean, I'm tempted to read it out, but that will use up time, where you say, actually, it's been shown that the queue is one of the great places. Absolutely. Where you just climbed this little mountain, this little 5K mountain that you thought you wouldn't be able to climb. You've climbed it once again. Yeah. And there are others in your queue. and suddenly men and women who wouldn't normally touch one another's slightly sweaty shoulder are touching one another and saying, I love you, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And we're telling one another things that we wouldn't tell one another if we just bumped into one another on the street, because of parkrun. So to make it smoother and make us finish as we do in races, where we can just walk away knowing that a machine has scanned us, would be detrimental to the spirit of parkrun. Do you agree with that?
I think that's, you've picked on what I think is probably the most important aspect, and I'm so glad you highlighted it. And as Steve Hake, the professor who did the research about the benefits of the social side and the benefits for mental health, points out that at a race, the front runners, they finish, they just go away. They don't hang around to see anybody else coming in. But because they too have to queue up and they're with the rest of us, and then they see that everybody's waiting. The other thing that's different from a race, particularly a long race, I've done races where everything's been put away by the time I finished. You know, there's one man sitting with a stopwatch in the middle of a field and everybody else has gone home for their tea. But at parkrun, nothing is moved. No flags are put away, no signs are put away, no funnel tape is taken down until the very last person is in. And I love that about it, because that's saying that everybody is equally important.
And yet, I have friends at the tennis club, and I was a tennis player and still am before I was a runner. And they say, what's the point in taking part in something that doesn't have a reward, that isn't competitive? And they are completely, and I give them lectures on this, they are completely missing the point that, as you've said, Eileen, so rightly, and as Paul Sinton Hughes said, it's a run, not a race. But we can compete. We can compete with ourselves for a start. We can compete with friendship groups. So we haven't got rid of competition. We are actually self-improvers by entering a competition with ourselves, but we are not trying to beat someone else. And we are not being told you're the best because you finished first. You could be finished first because you've got the longest legs or you're youngest. So what? It's wonderful. I mean, I don't know, this should be a question, but instead of that, it's just agree with it. Now, Ruth has a question.
Well, I was thinking that about the queuing, and like Matt said, it was that really rang a bell. I think I've heard people whisper in the past, you know, why can't they just do it like they do in competitions, you know, send us through. But what I also feel is when I arrive at a park run, especially as a tourist, I do feel welcome, but I'm not at ease at coming forward. As soon as I've done the run and I'm standing in the queue, it's that drug. It's the endorphin drug surging around my body. And to walk away, to just go home, I think I'd be a bag of jelly, you know, not being able to discuss it. So have you any thoughts about the drug that is endorphin that we're all probably addicted to on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. A few years ago, when I've had various spells where I've been treated for depression, and I was talking to one therapist and said to her, if I could bottle the feeling that I have on a Saturday morning after going to a park run, not necessarily doing a park run, going to a park run, then I would be okay. And of course, last year, the beginning of the pandemic and lockdown, and I live on my own and I work from home, so I wasn't seeing anybody, and I felt absolutely awful. And I could really feel myself sliding. And once I started writing the book, everything changed, because I was back with that community. Even though we weren't meeting in real life, I was with those people whom I'd spent Saturday mornings with, and with lots of new ones that I met through social media research. And the same, we may talk a little bit perhaps about the book launch in a moment, but that week or so when we were planning the launch relay, and then when we were part of it, was one of the happiest weeks of my life, because I was part of something so much bigger than myself. But yeah, absolutely the most powerful drug, Ruth. Absolutely agree.
Are you a drug addict, Emma? It's a good drug. It's a self-induced drug, if we're going to keep calling it a drug.
I think my buzz comes from the very start, at the start line, when I do a pre-run briefing, and I just see the volume of people that are there to all do the same thing, and that gives me a real pleasure and a buzz, you know, seeing that, and everyone's smiling, and everyone's listening to me as well. It's just incredible. Although now I realise my briefing has got to be reduced considerably, so I'm just working on that at the moment, ready for June. But yeah, and running itself can give you a really good feeling, and that's why I run. And actually, I'm injured at the moment, but I continue trying to run because I miss the feeling I get when I do. So yeah, I think park running itself just gives everyone that feel good factor, to be fair.
Yeah.
Eileen, I could focus a little bit on Emma's briefings at the start, where we all have to be completely quiet. It's wonderful. It's very special, but I won't. I'll ask you about, and it's linked to the way you start your book on this notion of religion, on this thing called tourism, where we go to other park runs. How has that experience been for you?
Quite amazing, really. It has given me a reason to go places that I would never have gone to before. And I don't just mean, you know, oh, let's go to Venice for the weekend, or let's go to Guernsey or Jersey for the weekend. I did go to Guernsey just to get the G so that I could complete the Staying Alive challenge. Yeah, hands up there. But places like, I talk in the book about going to Slough to get my U for Upton Court. Who would choose to go to Slough otherwise? But I had a lovely, lovely time. It was a great course. The people were delightful. There's a strange new town in the northwest called Skelmersdale, and they have one of the loveliest parkruns with a fantastic community. I would never have gone there otherwise. And so just collecting, whether it's letters of the alphabet or going to stay with friends who happen to live nearby. I've got quite a few friends in Hull, so of course I've done Hull and the Humber Bridge and Peter Pan. It just gives you the chance to look at your own surroundings, your own country, and go to places that you would never have dreamed of going to otherwise. In London, for example, you know, obviously I've done Hampstead Heath and Ali Pali, but I've also done Gladstone Park, which, you know, is quite an obscure little place. I loved Mile End, where you run out and back along the Regent's Canal and people sitting on their houseboats having breakfast, cheering you as you pass by. Just wonderful.
And as Ruth said, that in other circumstances, you wouldn't just go up and talk to people.
Absolutely.
But if you're a tourist and you've just done a park run, you will actually talk to anyone, and there's no stranger danger. Strangers will talk to you. And what a fabulous feeling. And it's quite interesting that the then Prime Minister, near the beginning years, the early years of parkrun, well into parkrun, had this idea of the big society and volunteers and people volunteering. And we've mentioned parkrun and parkrunners, but of course they are parkrun joggers, parkrun walkers, and most significantly, parkrun volunteers. And what's interesting, that all those people in those categories will speak just as effusively as we do about parkrun, bearing in mind that we've all done it anyway. We've done all four of those things. But it's another gift to parkrun that there are these add-ons that bring so much to us. And I am really by nature a solitary person, and I don't like people. And yet I love parkrun because you have the option. I'm being serious now, please don't laugh. You have the option of being with people or being by yourself in a beautiful place. And it's magic. Whereas other situations you go to, you're obliged to be with people, or other situations you go to, you are alone. And parkrun dovetails that longing so brilliantly. I don't know what it's like for you, Eileen, is it?
Yeah, I am a people person, very much so. And I love talking to strangers. And that's one of the things that I've missed very much over the last year, really. And I live in a beautiful part of the world. I live in the heart of the Lake District. I've got mountains literally on my doorstep. And so I've been able to run up and down the hills, and they've been quiet. And all my friends are saying, oh, isn't it lovely while the hills are quiet and we have them all to ourselves? And I found it a little bit sad because I like meeting people along the way. And this weekend, this week, when people have started coming back to the lakes, even if just for a day trip, I loved meeting somebody on the top of a hill, and I'd take their photo and they'd take mine, and we'd have a little chat about where they'd come from. And I was coming down the hill the other day, and some older guys were coming towards me, and they held the gate open, and I just laughed and said, that was good timing. And one of them said, "My name's John, I live in Staveley, if ever you're passing." And it just made me laugh so much. And I thought, I've not lost the knack of talking to strangers. And that's really important about parkrun.
And talking of strangers, there will be people watching this at the Swindon Festival of Literature who will wonder slightly what we're talking about and how they might find a way into this thing that gives 4 completely different people such a buzz, for people who are skeptical and cautious about life, but nevertheless find that this parkrun activity. Ruth, would you say that Eileen's book would give a newcomer the insights they'd be looking for and the information?
Yes. I mean, yes, especially if I gave it a preamble, because I think it's really affirming as a parkrunner. But if somebody wants to know what are you going on about, Ruth, absolutely. I think they'll find it all in your book. They might not believe it's possible. They might not believe that something like that can actually be so, so all-embracing and encompassing. And one of the things I thought that I found really interesting also was your discussion around the what happens in a church or a place of worship, and that ministers or are looking to some of the things that happen at a parkrun briefing in particular. And the idea, it's amazing to be, I've done a bit of tourism, not as much as you, but a little bit, and have loved it, especially when they say things like, anyone from anywhere else, another parkrun. So not only can you put your hand up and say, yes, I've come from Bristol or Cornwall or wherever, but also that that is my home turf, Ashton Court or whatever it is. And it just personalizes it. It's extraordinary to be in a group of people where that happens. So yes, in the first instance, if you know nothing about parkrun, you might find it unbelievable, but absolutely it's all in there. There's no convincing, you've said it all, I think. So
thank you.
Was that your intention, Eileen? Was that your intention to make it as much a record of parkrun as an introduction to parkrun?
Not really my intention, because Deborah Bourne wrote her encyclopedic history of parkrun back in, I think, 2014. And I didn't really feel the need to recover the ground that she'd gone on, which was explaining everything in very, very fine detail. I said before, I'm a storyteller and I wanted to tell other people's stories and my own story. What it actually became, which I think is much more powerful, was a love letter to parkrun. That I think I say this in the introduction, that everybody I spoke to, and from me as well, it's our love letter to parkrun. So yes, I hope it does encourage people who didn't know anything about it. But I didn't want it to just be a chronicle of this happened and then that happened, because that had been done very, 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 very well indeed already. Mine had to be more about the stories that people tell and the impact on people's lives.
No, thanks very much, Eileen. And I have to be careful what I say about the other books, but I'll just say none of the other authors, and there are a number of books on parkrun, have been invited to the Swindon Festival of Literature. We're very
I'm flattered.
we're very discerning, and this is really, really, really well written. But the other person who has been to the Swindon Festival has been the founder of parkrun. And I think, again, there's a comparison here with religion, that the founding spirit of parkrun is crucial to its survival. And it's great that it's got a team of 43 now who work around the world, and they have titles like executive and chief officer and so on. But it's also brilliant that the spirit that Paul Sinton Hewitt brings to any interview he does,
Yeah.
or any park run that he goes to. I mean, he's almost Christ-like in that he goes to the people. He isn't the big important. He isn't the man you first see when he walks into a room. He maybe could even be, if he doesn't mind me saying so, the last, because he is so humble and so beautiful. And I think, I don't want to sing his praises too much. He's just another mortal human being, but his spirit runs right through parkrun, and that we all want to care and love and look after one another is from that spirit. And many big corporate organizations that have been set up to do good have not worked because that spirit has been missing. So, I mean, internationally, publicly, I think we want to say thank you, Paul Sinton Hewitt, and thanks to the parkrun team for keeping that spirit going. Now, listen, that was a speech, not a question.
I think it's a really important point that about organizations setting up to do good. He said that if we'd set out to create a public health initiative, it wouldn't have worked. We set out to create a fun way for people to get together on a Saturday morning and do 5K, but it became the greatest public health initiative of all time, even though they didn't set out that way. But I think the things you said about Paul, I would echo. I'm very glad you said it, because I would have felt embarrassed saying it. But yeah, that's exactly, it's that spirit that comes from above, from his personality and his very strong ethos that comes through all the time.
And the fact that parkrun fits in prisons, it fits on the West Bank, it fits in desert, it fits in mountains, and it fits in lovely parks. Emma, did you want to add something there?
About Paul Sinton Hewitt?
Well, anything.
Yeah. I mean, I've had the pleasure of meeting him on a couple of occasions, including when we first launched Junior Parkrun here in Swindon. And he is so humble and such a normal, nice chap to speak to, and his wife Jo, and it was a great experience, actually. And of course, I met him at the Literature Festival as well. And I think the whole team at Parkrun are just great people. We all think alike, don't we, about parkrun, and they obviously enjoy their roles, and just like I do, and many other volunteers who work for parkrun. So yeah, and I must say, if you ever get the chance, I mean, I presume that you've spoken with him, Eileen, is that right?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he checked through the chapter about himself in the book, because I wanted to make sure I got that absolutely right. But we met him very spectacularly a week or so ago when we launched the book. Have I got time to talk about the relay? It was a way of launching a book which hadn't been done before. I knew that I couldn't do a book launch in a bookshop because they were closed at the time. I was then thinking maybe parkrun will have started again by the time the book comes out, but no. And I thought, well, it would have been so lovely to have the launch at Bushy Park where it all began. So when that wasn't possible, I thought, well, maybe take the book to Bushy Park. And of course, we're runners, so we'll run there. And so I just decided, right, we'll have a relay of runners and we will set off from Fellfoot and we will take the book to Bushy Park and we will give it to Paul. And it happened. And I cannot believe the spirit and the power and the collaboration and the cooperation of the parkrun community, that 105 strangers, well, 104, I knew one of them already, came together over 7 days to run 330 miles. Nobody got lost, nobody dropped the baton, nobody forgot to charge the GPS tracker overnight. And they arrived in Bushy Park, the final two runners, with 5 minutes ahead of schedule after all of that. And it was just the most wonderful tribute to what parkrunners are capable of creating. So I'd got the chance to drive down because I was working to promote the book. I could travel. So I went down ahead of it and met Paul and Joanne in the park. And we waited for the two final leg runners to approach, and it was really moving because Paul was watching on the tracker and he could see that they were nearly at the park gates, and then we saw these figures coming up towards us. And we were carrying the book in a customized backpack. And one of the runners took it off and he put it on the ground for Paul to pick up. And Paul said, that's the exact spot where the first Bushy Park time trials started. Oh, spine chills. And then, you know, we'd had to keep it all very low key because of the restrictions in place at the time. So we hadn't advertised it and we discouraged people from coming along. But there was a photographer and there were a couple of friends of mine and a couple of people from Bushy Park. And Paul looked round and he was just counting and he said, there's 13 people here. 13 was the number of the first Bushy Park time trial. And it was one of those magical afternoons, you know. So yeah, boy, did I meet him and did I enjoy that day.
Oh, Eileen, that sounds 10 times better than glasses of wine and canapes indoors.
Yeah.
Did they do 5K each? Is that the way it worked?
No, we decided that would be logistically very challenging because it would have meant a lot more people involved. Yeah. And also there would have been places where the changeover was in the middle of nowhere, maybe at the side of a busy main road. So I said, look, choose where you want to run. First of all, we got a map of the whole country, a pedestrian map. I knew where Bushy was. I knew it was down the M6 and the M40, but how do you do it on foot? So a friend created a route for pedestrians, split that into 7 sections. And then I recruited a regional organizer for each section so that they could tailor that route to near where park runners lived. Because again, we had to have people running in their own locality at the time. So we said to people, you can run as far as you want or as little. On day 2, the first runner was one of my vicars who's in the book, Matt Gilder. He ran 11 miles.
Okay, we have, Eileen, this is like the Today program. We haven't got time to go through all the 280. No, seriously, it's such a great story. It was another book. Just in case our 2 guest interviewers have another short question, I'll give them a bit of thinking time by asking you my last question, which is, I was intrigued by the cover, and it's 4 people in different positions, and it follows through in the book, and you see them. Can you see them? You see them there in silhouette. And I've discussed it at the dinner table here. What does this mean? Is it a symbol? Is it? And somebody has come up with the best solution, but I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, I had got a cover idea, which was just a very pretty picture of some runners. And my younger son said, not dynamic enough, you want something really dynamic. And he found that very famous silhouette of the ascent of man, of gradually, you know, the evolution of mankind. And in his picture, in his sketch of it, the final person was being handed a barcode, was handing their barcode to a scanner. So I passed that image to my photographer friend Laura, who created that image. You'll notice it's not 4 people, it's the same 2 people twice. It's Laura and Dave and Laura and Dave. And she created the photograph, and then we passed the whole thing over to a fantastic designer called Ellen, who made it into a cover. And then using that little image, the silhouette, my editor, who's also a very good photographer, he created a silhouette just to pop in.
But what are they doing? I want to know what each one is doing.
They're having fun moving. Laura and Dave in the photograph actually have a business and a whole lifestyle about movement and running.
Well, the best theory I heard was it's based on the ascent of man silhouette. First person is doing up their laces.
Okay, yeah.
Second person is stretching, warming up. Third person is starting to run. And 4th person is running.
Is doing it, yeah.
Is that a good enough interpretation?
Perfect.
Ruth and Emma, do you have either a final point or a final question that either gets a short answer or is a short comment, please?
I was just thinking that as with COVID, with all the impact of COVID and the talk about long COVID that so many people are suffering from, do you have any thoughts on how, without making it a public health statement, to include people, to encourage people. I only say this because I heard somebody who is a park runner talking about the impact of long COVID on her lungs, but as soon as she gets into the fresh air, something changes for her.
I think being welcomed back into the community will be very important. A very good friend of mine here in Ambleside, who is the event director for Rothay Parkrun, which is a brand new one. They'd only had 6 events before lockdown. She has got long COVID very seriously, and her business is a fitness instructor, so she's been really stricken. She can't wait for it to come back, to be part of that community, because she's quoted in the book, she loves volunteering more than she loves running. So it's going to be a massive impact on her being able to cope with what she's dealing with.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eileen. Emma, did you have any last word?
Yes, Eileen, I'd really love to know where you love to run. Do you have a favourite running route?
Yeah, I do. It's very hilly. It's almost from my front door. It's a mountain called Loughrig. It's just over 1,000 feet high, so it's a very small mountain, but it's really, really steep start, and it's just beautiful. It has a bit of everything, different kinds of paths, a bit of bog to run through, not too much tussocks, I don't really like tussocks, and a magnificent cairn at the top, a trig point, with a view of 5 different lakes from the top. And I can manage it, you know, even when I'm not very fit at the moment, but I can manage it. It's 9 kilometres round trip from my house, and that is definitely my favourite.
Well,
Sounds
Eileen,
incredible.
Eileen, we may create another favourite park run for you when we get you to Swindon one day. Guest interviewers Emma Sperring and Ruth Holland, thank you both very much. And finally, the Swindon Festival of Literature, Lydiard Park Run and Seven Fields Park Run say a big thank you to today's guest author, Eileen Jones. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.